Okay, finally ready to do an alliance war. Uh, kind of tips, tricks, just general information on things that you can do to improve your game. This one's almost over. We got 11 minutes left until it ends. We're down by 100. Not happening. It happens, but these guys had about 2.5 million more collection power than us, and we had one guy lose his phone on a drunken escapade on Saturday night. So we're kind of down a man, down a bit of points. It happens. It's okay. But I think this will put us at like 4-2 for 6 awards so far, so we're not doing bad. But the way it works with the matchmaking, you win more, you fight harder teams, you more likely to lose, and then you go back down, fight easy teams, work your way back up, fight harder teams, and it's just going to be a constant ping pong of back and forth, with the ELO rankings and moving people up and down. So I just want to go through this and give some ideas on things that you can do. First thing is you can always find your opponent's name once you get match made. And one of the best things to do is go to leaderboards by clicking your profile and going to power leaderboards, going to strongest alliance, finding your own, and then looking for your enemies somewhere around you. Because generally they'll be within 100 spots of you up or down, depending on what your level is. But you can see here, Shield Trap, they're at 57 or 50,770,000. I can click on them and then switch to collection power and pull up exactly how much they all have and know that, oh, these guys have the lowest. These guys were also on their flight decks, not not by accident at all. They designed that very well. It's a great idea to put your lowest CP guys on the flight decks because they're the least powerful and they aren't going to be able to sustain. And then keep all that in mind, and then go into your alliance war and start targeting flight decks. That is the easiest way to find a path down. However, a lot of teams have kind of caught on to this method, and what they'll do is they'll bait people, and they'll put the weakest guys up front and let you kind of hit one of these things and go straight down the middle where they want you to hit a trap of security on one side and engineering on the other on a big room like a bridge or a med bay or something like that. So these guys were very clever. Their name is Shield Trap, not not inaccurate at all. We actually went down flight deck one first, went all the way to the bottom, and then cut across. They had their barracks down here, and we took that out pretty early. And then their armory took a little longer to get, and unfortunately, they'd already made about more than half their attacks by then, so it wasn't worth it as much. We had to spend a lot of resources killing their bridge without taking out security first, and that hurt a bit. And then we were just going for points by taking out reactor and flight deck, and we almost got this last flight deck, but we're just out of power here. So when you're looking at these, you want to view, who is lower on their CP side, and then you can also look at battle history. So one of the cool things about this is if you actually go into your defense, you can go, like they started on flight deck 2, for instance, with us. So you can go here and you can actually look and see who attacked and what they used. And so what I use this for is I can go ahead and look and see, okay, well, if this guy used this and this guy used this and he's exposed to our side for attack, I can figure out what teams they won't have on defense by process of elimination. And if we go back and hit the participation page, you can actually look and sort by attacks and see who's attacking the most, how many points they're doing, how much damage they've done, all that kind of stuff, and figuring out where exactly they fall. And you can see here, there's some of these guys who have like no damage or attacks because they're completely 100% on defense right now. And those guys were guarding the best rooms, of course, and that is a great tactic, by the way. Have some guys that are designated defenders. Maybe if you have people that can't hit your start time, they would be probably your best bet for putting them on defense because then they aren't required to be there as soon as Arena War goes live. Or I keep calling it Arena War. It's Alliance War. Sorry. But that's a really good idea is to have some people dedicated to defense on the most important rooms, which are Armory, Barracks, Bay, and Bridge. Especially bridge. Like if they take your bridge and you don't take theirs, you're pretty much screwed. You're not going to make up 200 points anywhere else. So bridge is definitely the most important to protect now. I think early on we were worried more about the global buffs than the bridge because we were going for the actual fights rather than worrying about points. And points are really king in this match. More than anything else, you have to get points to win. Yeah, you can win more battles than them, but if they get better rooms than you, then you're not going to get as many points and you're going to lose. So You may be the better attackers, but if you don't attack smart, then you will not win. So a couple other ideas. It's also a good idea. Like these guys really decked out their flight deck 3, so we wouldn't go down that side. And you can see they had med bay hidden right under it. That is such a great tactic because we saw a lot less resistance over here. Took out one of their lowest CP guys on that one, and then eventually came back and cleared these late game. But we went down this side and totally avoided med bay and armory for the first half of the war, and that really slowed us down. And brilliant strategy. I would highly recommend doing something like that. They had bridge right here in the middle with their two strongest guys going full defense with engineering and security supporting it. So with that, with the counters and deflects up because they were really good about getting their boosts in, that is killer. That is so hard to overcome. So yeah, check your attack history, see what they've done, try to figure out what the weak targets are. If you see high priority rooms like barracks, armory, medbay, or bridge, and they look relatively easy to take, or wouldn't cost too many resources, definitely go for them as soon as possible. Really, the only time constraints you have, if you can get armory early on in the game, it really hurts their attacks, and that's the primary target early on. A lot of people get caught up in medbay and barracks and bridge just because they're nice ones to take out, but really armory is the primary target. And if you're not planning on destroying the entire helicarrier, then really once you get their armory, it's just a race until they get to yours. So you want to use your attack bonus as much as possible before they can actually take yours out. Another thing is track your stats. You have that participation board. You can get this, and we have a guy in our group that uses some like photo stitch app, and he grabs all of these all the way down to the very last person, stitches them together, and posts it in our Discord. And that's for future reference, so we can see how people are doing. You can track damage. You can track how well they're doing. Try to figure out where people are, kind of in the game and how well they're doing, and adjust accordingly. Some people may be better suited for offense than defense, and that's just how it goes. I play more defensive because I guard the barracks, and I also have pretty high CP as far as our alliance goes. But it just depends. Everybody's a little different. You kind of have to work at it. I know it's a real pain to swap rooms and stuff like that because you can't carry your defense over and copy it. But of course, you can do that a little bit. It just takes some time using your save slots for squads and all that to swap everybody over. Some other ideas, track your enemy's room placement. So right now we've kind of created a Google spreadsheet of this. So we put their name on it so that in the future we can track what they used against us. And if we get matched up with these guys again, which there's a very high probability that we will, we'll know their layout, assuming they don't change it. So if they've been really successful, because we saw they've already won twice this season, they were like top 20 in the leaderboards or 28 or something like that. Um, pretty high up there. I think we're like in the 70s or something. Um, but basically, if you can track that, you'll have an advantage over them the next time you fight them by knowing their room placement potentially. And if you have the time, grab the names of the people that are in these rooms too. Make sure you know who's who, because if you track all that and matches up again, you have a pretty good idea of what their layout is, and you can know, oh, well, if we just push right down the middle here, we can take out, medbay, engineering, and armory in, the first half of the fight, and then that'll really gimp their ability to counterattack us, right? So, there's just a lot of stuff you can do with that. You know, Trying to figure out like where they are or knowing their layout ahead of time is just it's so important. So if you're in an alliance group and everybody's fighting kind of at the same level, you can get a few of these a week or several of these a week and start building that library. And if you have a global Google Doc or something like that to share it all, you will pretty quickly have an idea of how your enemy is almost every time because everybody's on one of the 4 time schedules, so you have a 1 in 4 shot of hitting somebody again from that group that you can even be matched up with, right? It's basically, I think we've gone up and down in CP about maybe 50 to 100 slots, and so if there's really only 200 people that we can match up against, and a fourth of them are on our time slot, then that's really only 50 alliances that we could even hit, right? So it's just, I mean, that's not a whole lot. So we're going to see a lot of repeats, probably sooner rather than later, just because of the way that the ELO ranking is going to work. And, having this layout is going to be a huge, huge advantage. Another thing on defense, don't overestimate the value of security and engineering as rooms. They're there to provide buffs. They are not there to protect points, right? They're not like losing engineering and security is bad because you lose those buffs and debuffs. However, the rooms themselves are not that important. But if they have to spend 32 plus attacks getting through them, then that's not a big deal for you. That actually probably works to your advantage because that's 100 points that they get from those two rooms and they have to spend a lot of resources on it, especially early on. So I really like this config here. It only gives the buffs to 3 rooms each instead of 4 by stacking them in the middle. But this way you get the double buff on one really important room, which they use for their bridge. And they had 2 guys here, complete defense. That's all they did. So really, really smart strategy there. Um, let's see. Don't make your flight decks too easy for attackers, but if you're trying to bait somebody down one side, like these guys did, they put a really tough defense up here and up front, and then left the guy. This guy had like shield minions in his second slot, and that was like, And since it was called shield trap, we didn't want to go that way, so we went down this side, and that may be what they wanted, but we still did pretty good coming across here. We just took too long to get to the armory. Was the problem. If your roster is short on depth, a really good idea for defense is just to put one really strong character with a bunch of shield minions or some low level guys. And this forces the enemy to think about, like, oh, well, I got to use somebody that matches them. So if I got a 40k Spider Man with a bunch of shield minions, well, they're going to have to match me with at least a couple of 25, 30k characters to kill him and not, lose the fight. So that can be a really good tactic to make them waste some characters or break apart some of those synergy teams so that they don't have as strong of an attack for later rooms or later fights. Another thing is so there are some heroes such as like Gamora, Wolverine, Miss Marvel, Deadpool, Ronan, Yondu, and Black Panther that are all really good as solo fighters. And those guys are awesome to have around because what they'll do is if you put them on their own, they can actually kind of self-sustain for the most part, or at least continually attack over and over and over again. Or like with Ronan and Yondu, they summon minions, which is more things that they have to target and fight. They're just really strong solo characters, and so I recommend using them kind of in those roles. But there's a lot of characters that can fit that description, and it also depends on what your roster is. So if you have some oddball characters that don't really fit in the team very well, those are really good candidates. Like just throwing them out there as one guy in your 6 through 8 teams or something to help beef them up and make them a little tougher and make them think too. So for offense, just remember points are king above all else. Yes, you want to get global buffs down as soon as possible. Armory is the biggest one. Is if you can get there early, you can really, really turn the tide of the war. But if you don't get bridge and they get your bridge, you're not going to win the fight. So reactors worth 100, which is a decent amount, but bridge is really the key for a lot of victories. Try to match power for power and don't waste attacks. So if you have, say, a 150k team and you're going against like a 100 or a 90k team, it's probably overkill, and you could use those characters or at least one of them somewhere else maybe later in the fight. If you can try to win with as, you know, cutting it close but not too close to win the fight without losing, uh, and wasting energy. You just want to match the power as much as you can, and as you fight more and more, you're going to get more used to that and figure that out. But that's probably the hardest thing to do on attack is figuring that out. Is like, what can I get away with? Do I really need 5 characters, or can I do 4 and just get through? Uh, because this isn't a raid, you don't have to sustain. Healers should probably be mostly on defense because you don't need to make it through more than one fight. Nobody survives more than one fight, no matter how healthy they are. Find single heroes that can solo low teams. It's like the opposite of the defense tip that I was just talking about. Gamora can basically knock out an entire shield team in a couple of turns. Characters like that, Yondu is really strong on his own. Deadpool is really strong, especially against minions because he applies bleed and does that rebound chain attack. And I found, for instance, I had one attack that I barely won, but I had a 12k boomer and a bunch of 1,000 power guys around him, and I was able to clear an entire shield team with that just barely. Like he had the sliver of health left, and I was cutting it super close. So I'll probably upgrade him just a little bit more to maybe do about 14, 15k just to make sure that that doesn't happen again, and I don't have to worry about it because it was very, very tight. Um, But guys like that, you can get those 10 to 20K guys that'll just be able to clear one of those little teams pretty easily. And then another thing, just look out for traps. If they have a bunch of shield guys on one flight deck and everything else looks pretty stacked, that means they want you to go down that one. And while it may look enticing for the free money, elite war or the war bucks or whatever, and getting the wins and all that, it's really not helpful early on in the fight because you're going to be removing some of your potential attacks to get deeper into their helicarrier by wasting them on stupid shield minions that probably take you directly to the reactor or something pointless. Um, Now, maybe a great way to bait people down into your helicarrier, but I think it's better to save those for the end when everybody's trying to stretch their rosters and use a bunch of 5K guys to clear those. Um, so those are just some ideas. Obviously, we didn't win this time, but it happens. Not a big deal. Um, but we'll pursue on. So I'm gonna probably share that alliance template thing in Google Doc eventually, where we just have kind of the way of tracking the enemy room placement and how it's set up. And if anybody else wants to use that, I think it's going to be a really good library tool. However, once people start catching on that we know what they're doing, then it probably won't be very useful anymore. We'll have to keep updating it, but we'll see. Should be interesting. I'm sure a lot of alliances will share and talk about, who they fought previously and how well they did, and we'll see how it goes. But anyway, let me know if you have any other questions.